2 years ago, my world turned upside down when my brother called me crying. The family restaurant in Portland, Oregon was 3 months behind on rent, suppliers were cutting them off, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. "Please, Emma," he begged over the phone, his voice breaking. "Grandpa's legacy will die if you don't help us. Romano's is everything our family has built. I can't be the one who lets it all fall apart." I was sitting in my apartment in downtown Portland, looking out at the rain-soaked streets, when Jake made that call. I'd just gotten home from another 12-hour day at my marketing firm, exhausted but proud of the progress I was making in my career. At 28, I was finally hitting my stride professionally, and my personal life seemed perfect too. My fiancée Sarah and I had been together for 3 years, and we were planning our wedding for the following summer. I didn't hesitate for even a moment when Jake asked for help. When our grandfather, Antonio Romano, passed away 6 months earlier, he left me $180,000, his entire life savings, accumulated over decades of running the restaurant and living frugally. Grandpa had always been special to me. While Jake got the restaurant business directly, Grandpa wanted me to have the financial security to pursue my own dreams. "Emma," he told me shortly before he died, "you have a good head for numbers and a kind heart. Use this money wisely, and remember that family always comes first." I was supposed to use that inheritance for my wedding to Sarah. We'd already put deposits down on the venue, the historic Multnomah Athletic Club, and hired a photographer, caterer, and band. Sarah had found her dream dress at an upscale bridal boutique in the Pearl District, and I'd been saving up to surprise her with the honeymoon of her dreams in Italy, specifically Tuscany, which she'd always talked about visiting. But family comes first. That's what Grandpa always taught us. Within 48 hours of Jake's desperate phone call, I had liquidated my savings account and transferred $150,000 to save Romano's Italian Kitchen, the restaurant our grandfather built from absolutely nothing in 1962. Grandpa had arrived in Portland as a teenager, speaking no English, with nothing but a worn suitcase and a handful of traditional family recipes passed down from his grandmother in Sicily. He worked 3 jobs: dishwasher at a diner, construction worker during the day, and janitor at an office building at night, for 5 years to save enough money to lease a tiny storefront in Southeast Portland. What I didn't tell my brother Jake is that my lawyer, David Chen, insisted on proper documentation for such a large financial transaction. David was a family friend who'd handled Grandpa's estate, and he was protective of my interests. "Emma," he said when I told him about Jake's situation, "I understand you want to help your brother, but $150,000 is a life-changing amount of money. We need to structure this properly to protect you." Instead of a simple loan, we structured it as a business investment. The paperwork was complex, but clear. I now own 75% of Romano's Italian Kitchen, with Jake retaining 25% for his sweat equity and years of management. The agreement included detailed provisions about profit sharing, decision-making authority, and what would happen in various scenarios, including sale of the business. I would have controlling interest in all major decisions, including any potential sale of the restaurant or property. The paperwork was crystal clear, but Jake was so desperate and overwhelmed that he signed everything without reading it carefully. "I trust you completely, Em," he said, tears in his eyes as he signed the documents in David's office. "You're saving my life here. I promise I'll make this up to you." I should have paid attention to what happened next. The first red flag should have been how quickly Jake recovered from his apparent desperation. Within a week of receiving the money, he was posting Instagram stories of expensive dinners with my fiancée Sarah, while I was working 60-hour weeks at my marketing job, trying to rebuild my depleted savings account. The photos showed them at upscale restaurants I couldn't afford, even when I had my full inheritance. Places like Le Pigeon and Canard, where dinner for 2 easily cost $200 or more. Sarah had volunteered to help with the restaurant's social media marketing shortly after I saved Romano's. "It'll be great experience for my portfolio," she said, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "I can really help Jake modernize the brand and attract a younger demographic." I thought it was sweet how she wanted to help my family. What I didn't realize was that she was spending more time at Romano's than at her own apartment, and certainly more time there than she was spending with me. The second red flag was Jake's sudden transformation into a confident entrepreneur. For someone who had nearly lost the business through mismanagement, he seemed awfully confident about expansion plans. "We should open a second location," he told me over dinner at Romano's one evening in late February. "Maybe in Seattle or San Francisco. The brand has so much potential if we scale it right." I laughed, thinking he was getting ahead of himself. "Jake, we just saved this one. Let's focus on making it profitable first before we think about expansion." But Jake was insistent, his eyes gleaming with an ambition I'd never seen before. "You don't understand the restaurant business, Em. This is our chance to really make it big. Sarah's been helping me research market opportunities, and there's huge potential for growth. That's when I knew something was fundamentally wrong. Jake had been running Romano's into the ground for 3 years. He'd inherited the business when Grandpa got too old to manage it, but he'd never shown any real aptitude for business management. His idea of marketing was putting a handwritten "Special Today" sign in the window. His inventory management was chaotic, his staff's scheduling was haphazard, and his financial record-keeping was so poor that he couldn't even tell me how much the restaurant was making or losing in any given month. Now suddenly, he was a visionary entrepreneur with expansion plans. The third red flag was Sarah's dramatic lifestyle upgrade. My fiancée, who had always been careful with money and practical in her spending, suddenly had a wardrobe full of designer handbags, expensive jewelry, and clothes that cost more than her freelance graphic design income could possibly support. When I asked about it, she deflected with vague explanations about new clients and business success. "Business is really booming," she said with a smile that somehow didn't reach her eyes. "I landed a few corporate contracts, and you know how well those pay." I wanted to believe her. Sarah had always been ambitious about her career, and I was proud of her success, but the numbers didn't add up. I knew roughly what freelance graphic designers made in Portland, and even with several good contracts, she couldn't afford the Gucci handbag I saw her carrying or the Tiffany bracelet that appeared on her wrist. The fourth red flag was subtle but unmistakable: the way they looked at each other. I first noticed it during my birthday dinner in March. We were at Romano's. Jake insisted on hosting my birthday there to show off the improvements he'd made with my money. The restaurant did look better: fresh paint, new tablecloths, updated lighting that gave the dining room a warm, intimate atmosphere. But throughout the evening, Jake would catch Sarah's eye across the table, and they'd share these little smiles like they had inside jokes I wasn't part of. When Sarah got up to use the bathroom, Jake would watch her walk away with an expression I recognized but couldn't quite place. Later, I realized it was the same way he used to look at his high school girlfriend Jessica, with desire and possessiveness and the satisfaction of a secret shared. There were other small signs too. Sarah knew things about the restaurant's operations that she shouldn't have known from just helping with social media. She made comments about suppliers and staff schedules and upcoming menu changes that Jake hadn't mentioned to me. When I asked how she knew about these details, she'd laugh it off. "Oh, Jake and I were just brainstorming some ideas." But I pushed down my suspicions. I was planning a wedding, working full-time to rebuild my savings, and trying to monitor the restaurant's recovery without being an overbearing micromanager. I didn't have emotional energy for paranoia, and I trusted both of them completely. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in April. I had taken the afternoon off work to handle some wedding planning. We were 4 months out from our August wedding date, and there were a million details to finalize. I decided to surprise Jake with lunch at the restaurant. I stopped by his favorite deli and picked up the Italian combo sandwich he'd loved since we were kids, thinking we could eat together and maybe go over the first quarter numbers. Romano's was closed for the afternoon. It only served dinner on weekdays and lunch on weekends. But I had a key. Jake had given it to me when I became the majority owner, though I'd never used it before. I let myself in through the back entrance, expecting to find Jake doing paperwork or prep work for the evening service. Instead, I heard voices coming from the small office behind the kitchen. I recognized Jake's voice immediately, but it took me a moment to realize the second voice belonged to Sarah. What was my fiancé doing at the restaurant in the middle of a weekday afternoon? I moved closer to the office door, not really trying to eavesdrop, but curious about what they were discussing. That's when I heard words that made my blood turn to ice. "The property appraiser is coming next week," Jake was saying. "Once we have the official valuation, we can move forward with the sale." "How much do you think we'll get?" Sarah's voice. My fiancé's voice, coming from my family's restaurant office in the middle of the afternoon when she was supposed to be working on client projects. "At least $400K, maybe more. The location alone is worth $300K with the gentrification of this neighborhood, and with all the renovations Emma paid for, we're looking at serious money." My blood turned to ice water. I pressed myself against the door, barely breathing, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid they'd hear it. "And she has no idea?" Sarah asked. Jake laughed. Actually laughed. "Emma thinks she made a loan. She has no clue she actually owns most of the business. When we sell, she'll expect maybe $150K back, plus some modest interest. She'll never know the real sale price." "What about the legal paperwork? Won't she see the sale documents?" "I'll handle it. My buddy Marcus is a lawyer. Well, he's a real estate lawyer, but close enough. He'll draw up documents showing Emma as a creditor, not an owner. She's too trusting to verify the details, and she's too busy with her marketing job and wedding planning to pay close attention." There was a long pause. I could hear papers rustling and what sounded like one of them moving around the small office. Then Sarah spoke again, and her words shattered what was left of my heart into a million pieces. I can't wait to get out of this dump of a city. Tuscany is going to be perfect for our fresh start. Just think, Jake said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. In 6 months, we'll be sitting in our villa overlooking the hills of Tuscany with $400K in the bank, and Emma will still be here planning a wedding that's never going to happen. The timing is perfect, Sarah said, and I could hear her moving closer to Jake. By the time she figures out what happened, we'll be long gone. And honestly, after everything she's put me through with this endless wedding planning and her boring corporate job, I can't wait to start fresh with someone who actually understands ambition. She's always been naive, Jake replied. Even when we were kids, she'd believe anything I told her. Remember when I convinced her that Dad had a secret identical twin living in the basement? They both laughed at that memory, a memory of my childhood gullibility that Jake was now using to justify stealing my inheritance. What about the wedding vendors? Sarah asked. She's already put down deposits. Not our problem. Let her figure it out. Maybe it'll teach her to be less trusting in the future. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My brother and my fiancée, planning to steal my inheritance, sell my grandfather's legacy, and disappear together to Italy while leaving me with nothing but wedding deposits I couldn't recover and a life in ruins. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I almost couldn't process it. These weren't crimes of passion or momentary lapses in judgment. They had planned this systematically, working together to manipulate my trust and steal my future. I backed away from the door as quietly as I could and left through the same entrance I'd used. They never knew I was there. I drove home in a daze, Jake's sandwich still sitting on my passenger seat, now seeming like evidence of my own stupidity. That night, I called in sick to work and sat in my apartment, staring at the engagement ring on my finger. Everything I believed about my life was a lie. My fiancée didn't love me. She was planning to abandon me at the altar. My brother didn't respect me. He saw me as an easy mark to be exploited. The restaurant I'd saved wasn't a family legacy preserved, but an asset to be liquidated for their benefit. But as the shock wore off, something else took its place. Not rage, that would come later. What I felt first was a cold, calculating clarity that surprised me with its intensity. They thought I was too trusting to protect myself. They thought I was too naive to understand business law. They thought I was too busy and distracted to notice their deception. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, David Chen. It was late, but David had always told me to call him anytime if I had concerns about the restaurant investment. David, I need to understand exactly what rights I have as a 75% owner of Romano's Italian Kitchen. Well, Emma, you have controlling interest, he said, sounding alert despite the late hour. You can make all major business decisions, including whether to sell the property. As majority owner, you have the right to approve or reject any sale, change management, audit the books, pretty much anything. Why do you ask? I just want to make sure I understand my position clearly. Emma, as the majority owner, Jake cannot sell any part of the business without your written consent. The property, the business assets, even the restaurant equipment, nothing can be sold without your approval. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I'm just doing my due diligence. But everything was not fine. Over the next 3 days, I became a detective in my own life, investigating the two people I trusted most in the world. I hired a private investigator named Lisa Santos. She was a former Portland Police Department detective who now specialized in corporate and domestic investigations. Her office was in a nondescript building in Southeast Portland, and she had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that inspired confidence. I suspect financial impropriety at a restaurant I own and possibly personal misconduct by the management, I told her during our first meeting. What kind of misconduct? Lisa asked, taking notes. I think my business partner and my fiancé are having an affair and planning to defraud me. Lisa looked up from her notepad. That's a serious allegation. What evidence do you have? I told her about the conversation I'd overheard, about the suspicious behavior I'd noticed, about the financial inconsistencies that were starting to make sense. I need to know everything, I told her. Financial records, personal relationships, future plans, everything. This won't be cheap, Lisa warned. Comprehensive surveillance and financial investigation for 2 subjects, plus document analysis, could run $10,000 or more. Money is not an object. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Most people say that, but they don't mean it. I mean it. These people are planning to steal my inheritance and destroy my life. I want to know every detail of what they're doing. Within a week, Lisa had a preliminary report that made my stomach turn. The evidence was even worse than I'd imagined. Jake and Sarah had been having an affair for 4 months, starting just 2 weeks after I saved the restaurant. The PI had photos of them entering hotels together, credit card records of romantic dinners charged to Jake's personal account, and even screenshots of their text messages. Apparently, Sarah was careless with her phone security, and Lisa had been able to access her social media accounts where she'd been messaging Jake constantly. Some of the messages were explicit enough to make me physically nauseous. Others were strategic discussions about their plans. Jake, Emma asked about the Q1 numbers today. I showed her the fake books. She didn't suspect anything. Good. The less she knows about the real profits, the better. Are you sure she can't access the real accounts? Positive. I set up the Romano Properties account at a different bank. She has no idea it exists. But the personal betrayal was just the beginning. The financial fraud was extensive and sophisticated. Jake had already been in contact with 3 different commercial real estate agents about selling Romanos. He told each of them he was the sole owner and had the right to sell immediately. He'd provided them with forged documents that misrepresented the ownership structure. More damaging, he'd opened a business bank account under the name Romano Properties LLC and had been diverting restaurant profits into this account. Over 3 months, he'd stolen nearly $30,000, money that belonged 75% to me according to our agreement. The most infuriating discovery was that Jake had already put a deposit down on a villa rental in Tuscany. $5,000 for 6 months, paid from the Romano Properties account. My money was literally funding their romantic escape plan. Lisa also uncovered Jake's relationship with Marcus the lawyer, who turned out to be Marcus Webb, a real estate attorney with a suspended license due to ethics violations. They were planning to forge documents that would hide my ownership stake and make Jake appear to be the sole owner authorized to sell the restaurant. This isn't just infidelity and theft, Lisa told me as she presented her findings. This is fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. We're talking serious felony charges here. I had enough evidence to destroy them both immediately, but I wanted to be strategic. I wanted them to dig their hole as deep as possible before I buried them in it. So I played the oblivious fiancée and supportive sister perfectly. When Jake mentioned the property appraiser coming, I acted excited. That's great. Maybe you can get a loan against the value for that expansion you were talking about. When Sarah showed me pictures of Italian villas for inspiration for our honeymoon, I gushed about how romantic they looked. Tuscany is going to be magical. I can't wait to see it with you. Meanwhile, I was systematically building an unbreakable case against them. I hired a forensic accountant named Rebecca Martinez to audit every transaction in the restaurant's books. Rebecca was a former FBI white-collar crime investigator who now worked as a private consultant. What am I looking for? Rebecca asked. Everything. Skimming, false invoicing, diverted funds, hidden accounts. I want a complete picture of any financial impropriety. I had Lisa expand her surveillance to document every meeting, every phone call, every clandestine encounter. I wanted a timeline of their conspiracy that would be impossible to deny in court. I also hired a second attorney, Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in criminal law and white-collar crime. Jennifer had prosecuted financial fraud cases for the Multnomah County DA's office before going into private practice. Based on what you've told me, we're looking at multiple felonies, Jennifer said after reviewing Lisa's preliminary findings. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, possibly even RICO charges, if we can prove ongoing criminal enterprise. The restaurant's books revealed the full extent of Jake's theft. Over the past 3 months, he'd stolen nearly $40,000 through various schemes. Creating fake vendor invoices and keeping the payments, inflating supply costs and pocketing the difference, skimming cash from daily receipts, and charging personal expenses to the restaurant's accounts. But more than the money, Rebecca uncovered something that made my blood boil. Jake had been systematically undermining the restaurant's actual profitability to justify selling it quickly and cheaply. Your brother has been making the restaurant appear less profitable than it actually is, Rebecca explained. He's been hiding income, inflating expenses, and creating artificial losses on paper. Romano's is actually making good money, about $15,000 per month in net profit. This meant Jake wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to sell a profitable business for far less than its true value so he could get quick cash and disappear. But I needed to catch him in the act of the ultimate betrayal. I needed to let him try to actually sell the restaurant. The opportunity came in early May. Jake called me at work, practically vibrating with excitement. Em, you're not going to believe this. I've got a buyer interested in Romano's. Cash offer, quick closing. This could solve all our financial problems forever. I forced enthusiasm into my voice. That's amazing, Jake. How much are they offering? Well, it's a little complicated. They want to buy the business and the property together. The offer is $425,000. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. Jake, that's incredible. When do we meet with them? There was a pause, and I could almost hear him calculating how to present his lie. Actually, Em, this is where it gets tricky. The buyer wants a clean title with no complications. Since you loaned us the money to save the restaurant, they're concerned about potential liens or claims against the property. What does that mean exactly? It means we need to pay you back first. Your $150,000 plus some reasonable interest, and then I'll handle the sale as the clear owner. You'll get your money back, plus maybe an extra $20,000 for being so generous and patient. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. He was planning to steal $255,000 from me, my rightful 75% share of the sale proceeds. That sounds fair, Jake. I'm just happy you're getting back on your feet. What do I need to sign? Just a simple release saying you've been paid back in full and have no further claims on the business. Marcus is drawing up the paperwork. It should be ready by the end of the week. Perfect. He was about to commit fraud in writing with a disbarred attorney as his accomplice. I'm so proud of you, Jake. Grandpa would be happy to know you turned things around. Thanks, Em. I couldn't have done it without you believing in me. The irony was nauseating. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon at Marcus Webb's office in a rundown building in Southeast Portland. I told Jake I'd bring Sarah for moral support. This is such a big moment for our family, I said. And Sarah's practically family already, so I'd love for her to be there to celebrate with us. What Jake didn't know was that Lisa Santos would be in the parking lot with a full surveillance setup, recording everything. David Chen would be on standby with papers to stop any fraudulent sale, and Rebecca Martinez would be ready to testify about the financial fraud if needed. That Friday morning, I made one last addition to my evidence file. I went to Romano's early, before Jake arrived for the day, and made copies of every document in the office. I wanted to make sure I had originals of everything before they had a chance to destroy evidence. What I found in Jake's desk drawer almost broke my resolve to stay calm and see this through to the end. It was a handwritten letter from Sarah to Jake, dated 2 weeks earlier. My darling Jake, I can't wait for Italy. Just think, by summer we'll be sitting in our villa, sipping wine, and laughing about how easy this was. Poor Emma will probably spend months planning a wedding that will never happen, trying to figure out what went wrong. I almost feel bad for her, but then I remember we're about to be $400 richer and living in paradise. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, but you've shown me what real passion looks like. Emma is so predictable, so boring with her corporate job and her careful planning. You're exciting, spontaneous, willing to take risks for what you want. I can't wait to be your wife instead of hers. Love you always, SPS. I found the perfect little church in Montalcino where we can have a real wedding, not the sterile country club nonsense Emma has planned. I took photos of the letter with my phone, my hands shaking with rage. They weren't just planning to steal my money and disappear. They were planning to get married in Italy, while I was left dealing with the aftermath of their betrayal. That afternoon, I walked into Marcus Webb's office like a lamb to slaughter, playing my role perfectly. Jake was there wearing a new suit I'd never seen before, probably bought with stolen restaurant money. Sarah was dressed like she was attending a real estate closing for a mansion instead of witnessing my financial destruction. Marcus looked exactly like what he was, a disbarred lawyer trying to make money off desperate people. Cheap suit, nervous energy, shifty eyes, and the kind of smile that makes you want to count your fingers after shaking hands. Emma? Jake stood up and hugged me with what seemed like genuine affection. I'm so excited for you to finally get your money back with interest. Sarah hugged me too, and I had to resist the urge to pull away. This is so wonderful, Emma. You saved the day, and now everyone gets what they deserve. If only she knew how prophetic those words would turn out to be. Marcus laid out the documents on his desk with theatrical precision. This is pretty straightforward, he said in a voice that was trying too hard to sound professional. Emma, you're releasing all claims on the business in exchange for $170,000, your original loan plus $20,000 in interest. I pretended to read through the papers carefully, asking occasional questions to make it seem like I was processing everything. So after I sign this, Jake owns the restaurant free and clear? Exactly, Marcus said. No liens, no complications, no outstanding obligations. And Jake, you're comfortable handling the sale to this buyer on your own? Jake nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. This buyer is very motivated. Cash deal, quick closing. We could have the money in 2 weeks. I picked up the pen Marcus offered and started reading the signature page. I'm so proud of how you've turned the restaurant around, Jake. Grandpa would be amazed. As I pretended to sign the first page, I said casually, by the way, I'm curious. What made you decide to sell instead of expand like you were talking about? Jake and Sarah exchanged a quick glance. Market conditions? Jake said. This is the right time to maximize value. I nodded and moved to the second page. And the buyer doesn't mind that the restaurant hasn't been profitable for very long. Another glance between them. They see the long-term potential, Sarah said. Sometimes outside investors have better vision than family members who are too close to the situation. I was on the last page now. The fraudulent document that would supposedly give Jake the right to steal my inheritance and disappear to Italy with my fiancée. I set down the pen. Actually, I have a question about something. Marcus looked nervous. What kind of question? I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery. I'm wondering if you could help me understand this document. I showed them the photo of the original investment agreement, the one David Chen had carefully drafted, the one that clearly stated I owned 75% of Romano's Italian kitchen. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Jake's face went white as paper. Emma, I can explain. Explain what exactly? That you've been planning to sell my restaurant without my permission? Sarah stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. Emma, you're overreacting. I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. Am I overreacting? Let me ask you something, Sarah. How's the villa in Tuscany? The one you put a $5,000 deposit on with my money? Sarah's face crumbled. Jake looked like he might throw up on Marcus's desk. Marcus tried to salvage the situation. Now, everyone needs to calm down. There might be some confusion about the ownership structure. No confusion at all, I said, putting my phone away. I own 75% of Romano's Italian kitchen. These documents you've prepared are fraudulent. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you're not actually licensed to practice law anymore, are you, Marcus? Marcus started frantically gathering up the papers. I think this meeting is over. Oh, it's definitely over, I agreed. But Jake, before you go, I have something for you. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope I'd prepared that morning. This is official notice of my intent to exercise my rights as majority owner of Romano's Italian kitchen. Effective immediately, you're suspended from all management duties pending a full audit of the business finances. Jake's hands shook as he read the document. You can't do this. It's my restaurant. Actually, it's my restaurant. I own 75% of it, remember? David Chen? You remember David, the lawyer who actually has a valid license, will be in touch about the accounting discrepancies we've discovered. I stood up and looked directly at Sarah. Oh, and Sarah, this is for you. I took off my engagement ring, the $8,000 ring I'd bought her just 6 months earlier, and set it on the table with a satisfying click. I think you'll have more use for this than I will. Maybe you can sell it to help pay for Jake's legal fees. Sarah started crying, real tears this time, not the crocodile tears she'd perfected over 3 years of deceiving me. Emma, please, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been sleeping with my brother for 4 months while planning to steal my inheritance and abandon me at the altar. Did I miss anything important? Jake finally found his voice. How did I find out? Jake, you've been sloppy and stupid. Did you really think I wouldn't discover that you've been embezzling from the restaurant? Or that you were planning to forge documents to hide my ownership? Or that you opened secret bank accounts to hide stolen money? I headed for the door, then turned back for one final moment. Oh, and one more thing. Lisa Santos is waiting in the parking lot to serve you both with subpoenas. The Portland Police Department is very interested in your creative accounting methods, Jake. And Sarah, I hope you enjoy explaining to your family why our wedding was canceled and why you're facing potential criminal charges. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in months. The next week was absolute chaos, but it was the good kind of chaos, the kind that comes when justice is finally being served. Jake tried to call me dozens of times. When I finally answered one of his calls, he was crying. Emma, please, we can work this out like adults. I'll pay back every penny I took. With what money, Jake? You've already spent it on hotels and Italian villas and Sarah's designer handbags. I'll get a loan. I'll sell my car. I'll do whatever it takes. Please don't press charges. I'll lose everything. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from me. This isn't up to me anymore. The district attorney is handling it now. But I'm your brother. You stopped being my brother the moment you decided to betray me. Sarah sent me a long, rambling email begging for forgiveness. She claimed Jake had manipulated her, that she'd never intended to hurt me, that she still loved me and wanted to work things out. She said the affair meant nothing and that she'd been confused and made terrible mistakes. I deleted the email without finishing it. Some betrayals are too complete for forgiveness. The forensic accounting revealed the full scope of Jake's theft. $73,000 over 6 months, all of it stolen from profits that were rightfully 75% mine according to our ownership agreement. The Portland DA's office filed charges of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Marcus Webb was arrested for practicing law without a license and conspiracy to commit fraud. It turned out this wasn't his first time forging documents for desperate clients. He'd been running similar schemes for 2 years. But the real satisfaction came when I took complete control of Romano's. The first thing I did was hire a real restaurant manager, someone with actual experience turning around struggling businesses. Maria Gonzalez had managed 3 successful restaurant turnarounds in Seattle, and she came highly recommended. Within 3 months under Maria's management, Romano's was more profitable than it had ever been. I also discovered that Jake had been terrible at every aspect of restaurant management. Under competent leadership, with proper inventory control, staff scheduling, marketing, and financial management, the restaurant started thriving in ways that revealed just how badly Jake had been running it. 6 months after taking control, Romano's was not only profitable, but had a waiting list for weekend reservations. We'd been featured in Willamette Week as one of Portland's hidden gems, and food bloggers were raving about our authentic family recipes and warm atmosphere. The property was indeed worth $425,000, just as Jake had claimed. But instead of selling it, I used the equity to secure a business loan for expansion. Romano's now has a successful catering operation that serves corporate events throughout Portland, and we've launched a food truck that serves downtown during lunch hours. Jake pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have exposed even more of his crimes. He got 2 years in prison and 5 years of probation, plus full restitution of $73,000 plus interest and penalties. His lawyer negotiated the plea deal by emphasizing Jake's emotional distress and family loyalty gone wrong, which was laughable given the calculated nature of his crimes. Sarah avoided criminal charges since she wasn't directly involved in the embezzlement, but her reputation in Portland's tight-knit graphic design community was completely destroyed. Word spread quickly about her role in the scheme, and clients started canceling contracts. Last I heard from mutual friends, she'd moved back in with her parents in Sacramento, unable to find work in her field. Marcus Webb got 3 years in state prison for his various fraudulent activities. Apparently, Jake and Sarah weren't his only victims. The investigation uncovered at least 6 other cases where he'd helped people forge documents for real estate fraud. The most satisfying part came a year later, when Jake was released on parole. He called me from a halfway house in Beaverton, sounding broken and desperate. "Emma, I know you have every right to hate me, but I need to ask you something." I was curious enough to listen. "Could you maybe consider giving me a job at Romano's? Just washing dishes or bussing tables or something. I can't find work anywhere else with my criminal record." The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. "You want me to give you a job at the restaurant you tried to steal from me?" "I know how it sounds, but I'm desperate. No one will hire me. I've been to dozens of places, and as soon as they run the background check, they won't even consider me." "Jake, you didn't just steal money from me. You tried to steal Grandpa's legacy. You were going to destroy everything he built so you could run away to Italy with my fiancée." There was a long silence on the phone. Then Jake said, "I'm sorry, Emma. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I really am sorry. I was stupid and greedy, and I let Sarah convince me that we deserved more." "You're right," I told him. "It doesn't mean anything. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. Don't call me again." I hung up and went back to reviewing the architect's plans for Romano's second location. 2 years later, Romano's Italian Kitchen has become one of Portland's most beloved restaurants. We've been featured in Portland Monthly Magazine's Best of issue. Food and Wine mentioned us in their guide to Pacific Northwest dining, and James Beard Foundation's scouts have visited twice to evaluate us for potential awards. I hired Jake's ex-girlfriend from high school, Maria Santos, as our special events coordinator. She's excellent at her job and has no idea about the family drama that led to her employment opportunity. It's satisfying to have someone named Maria working at Romano's. It feels like honoring Grandpa's memory while building something better than what Jake had created. I never did get married. After Jake and Sarah's betrayal, I needed time to rebuild my ability to trust people, especially in romantic relationships. I've been seeing someone for 8 months now, a chef named Antonio, another nod to Grandpa, who I met through restaurant industry networking events. He knows the whole story of what happened with Jake and Sarah, and he says it makes him respect me more, not less. "You're tough," he told me after I shared the full details. Not many people would have had the strength to fight back like that. The villa in Tuscany that Jake and Sarah had planned to rent became my annual vacation destination. I booked it specifically to spite them initially, but I discovered I actually love the region. I've been taking Italian lessons, and am seriously considering opening a Romano's location in Florence someday. The irony would be perfect, building the international restaurant empire Jake dreamed of, but doing it legitimately and successfully. My parents were absolutely devastated when they learned the full extent of what Jake had done. Mom cried for days when I showed her the evidence, and Dad kept saying he couldn't understand how he'd raised a son who would betray family so completely. "We taught you both the same values," Dad said, shaking his head in bewilderment. I don't know where we went wrong with Jake. They supported my decision to press charges, though I know it broke their hearts to see one son in prison. They visit Jake occasionally, but our family gatherings are much smaller now. Some betrayals leave permanent scars. Jake writes me letters from prison sometimes. Long, rambling apologies full of self-pity and promises to make things right when he gets out. I don't read them anymore, but I don't throw them away either. Maybe someday I'll be ready to hear what he has to say, but not yet. The wounds are still too fresh. The trust fund I established in Grandpa's memory has helped 4 young entrepreneurs open their own restaurants in Portland. Each grant comes with business mentoring and support, ensuring the recipients don't make the kinds of mistakes Jake made. Each successful restaurant reminds me why I saved Romano's in the first place. Not for Jake, but for the legacy of hard work, family pride, and authentic Italian tradition that Grandpa built. Sarah tried to friend me on Instagram last month. I blocked her immediately and had to resist the urge to look at her profile to see what her life looks like now. Some chapters need to stay closed. The most important lesson I learned from this whole experience is that being too trusting isn't a character flaw. It's evidence of a good heart. The problem wasn't that I trusted blindly. The problem was that Jake and Sarah were fundamentally unworthy of that trust. I'm stronger now, wiser about protecting myself, but I haven't let their betrayal make me cynical about human nature. I still believe in family, in love, in doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. I just make sure to read all the fine print and hire excellent lawyers. Romano's Italian kitchen is thriving like never before. Grandpa's legacy is not only secure, but growing stronger. I'm building a life and a business I'm genuinely proud of. Jake and Sarah got exactly what they deserved. Each other, and the consequences of their choices. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not just walking away, if all the legal battles and family drama were worth the stress and emotional toll. My answer is always the same. I didn't fight for the money, or even for revenge. I fought for the principle that good people shouldn't be punished for trusting the wrong people, and that family legacies shouldn't be destroyed by greed and betrayal. Justice isn't always served quickly, and it isn't always perfect, but when it comes, it's incredibly satisfying. The best part? Last month, Romano's was named Best Italian Restaurant in Portland by the Oregonian's food critics. The review specifically mentioned our authentic family atmosphere and unwavering commitment to traditional values in an era of corporate dining. Grandpa would have been so proud.